My family called me the broke one for 12 years. Every dinner, every holiday, every family photo. There was always a joke about money, and somehow, I was always the punchline. Then one night, my sister invited the whole family to the most expensive restaurant in the city. She thought it was finally proof that she had won. But halfway through dinner, the owner walked past everyone else, straight to my table, and said, "Your papers are ready whenever you are." My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm 35 years old. And that was the first moment my family realized they never actually knew who I was. In my family, everybody had a role. My older brother Ethan was the successful one. My younger sister Paige was the favorite. And me? I was the broke one. Not officially. Nobody said it to hurt me. At least that's what they liked to pretend. But after enough years, jokes stop sounding funny and start sounding permanent. It was always little things, little comments, little laughs. The kind people think don't matter. At restaurants, my mom would hand me the cheapest menu section and say, "There are some affordable options here." Affordable. That word followed me everywhere, like struggle was my personality, not my situation. One year, on my birthday, my mom asked the waiter quietly, "Can we put her meal on a separate bill?" Not because I couldn't pay, because she assumed I couldn't. One night, the waiter brought separate checks, before anyone even asked. I remember looking confused for half a second. Then my sister laughed and said, "He probably assumed Vanessa likes to manage her budget carefully." Everyone smiled, even my mom. So I smiled too, because sometimes pretending not to care feels easier than admitting you do. The truth is, my family became obsessed with money after my parents lost our diner when I was 16. Cole's Kitchen. Small place, family-owned, nothing fancy. But when it failed, something changed in my mother. After that, money stopped being survival. It became value. My mother stopped trusting struggle after we lost the diner. After that, she treated financial success like protection, like money could stop humiliation from happening again. And anyone who looked unstable scared her. If you were successful, you mattered. If you struggled, you became embarrassing, and somehow, I became the reminder of everything my mother was scared of. Not because I failed, but because I moved slower than everyone else. If you've ever felt like your family decided who you were before they ever asked what you were going through, you'll understand this story. What they didn't know was that I wasn't struggling anymore, at least not the way they thought. I just stopped explaining myself years ago, because every time I tried, someone interrupted, corrected me, or turned it into a joke. So eventually, I let them believe whatever made them comfortable. I worked quietly. That's the best way to explain it. No flashy social media posts, no announcements, no fake success quotes online. I helped small restaurants survive. That was my job. Failing leases, bad staffing, debt problems. I fixed things quietly, then moved on. The strange part? My family loved the restaurants I helped save. They posted photos there, recommended them to friends, bragged about them constantly. And every single time, I sat there quietly listening while they praised places that only still existed because of work I did. Then one afternoon, my sister Paige called me. Excited voice. Almost too excited. She said, "We're doing dinner Friday night. Really fancy place. You should come." Then she paused and added, "Dress nice." Something about the way she said it didn't feel friendly. It felt intentional. The whole week, something felt off. Not wrong exactly, just planned. Like this dinner wasn't only dinner. My mom kept texting about reservations. My brother suddenly cared if I was coming. Even my dad called, which almost never happened anymore. And the night before dinner, I looked up the restaurant online, the Marlowe Room. The second I saw the name, I froze, because I knew that restaurant very well, and suddenly, I understood something my family didn't. They invited me there to feel important. They just didn't know I was already part of the reason the place still existed. I almost turned the car around twice, not because I was scared of the restaurant, because I already knew how these dinners worked. Somebody celebrates, somebody performs, and somehow, I become the joke. When I walked inside, my sister waved immediately. Big smile, perfect outfit, perfect table. Everything looked expensive, and suddenly, I understood this dinner wasn't casual. It was a stage. They already picked seats. Of course they did. My brother Ethan near the center, my mom beside Paige, my dad across from them, and me at the very end. Not hidden, not excluded, just placed. Far enough to feel separate, close enough to still watch everything. The waiter handed out menus. Before I even opened mine, my mom smiled and said, "Vanessa likes simple food." Simple. That word again. Like I was somebody who needed smaller choices, smaller portions, smaller expectations. The waiter nodded politely, and I smiled, because reacting would only make me look sensitive. And in my family, sensitivity was weakness. My sister ordered wine for the table, expensive wine, the kind people order mostly to impress each other. Then she looked at me and laughed softly. "Unless Vanessa wants something cheaper." Nobody corrected her, not even my dad. And honestly, that part hurt more. That's when I noticed something strange. The little comments, they weren't random tonight. They were coordinated, like everybody already knew the role they were playing. Paige bragged, Ethan joked. My mom reinforced it. And every conversation somehow circled back to money, success, lifestyle, failure. And somehow, I always became the comparison. Halfway through dinner, Paige stood up, smiling, holding her wine glass. And suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't just dinner. It was an announcement night. Beach house, promotion, engagement. Something big. Something designed to make everybody clap. She started talking about her new beach property first. Photos, views, private dock. My mom looked emotional. My brother looked impressed. Then Paige glanced at me and said, "It's important to build stability early." There it was. Not direct, not obvious, but sharp enough. Meant for me. Then she smiled again. But this time, I noticed something strange. She kept looking around the room after every sentence, like she needed people to react, to admire her, to confirm something. And suddenly, she didn't look confident anymore. She looked afraid of being unimpressive. My dad finally looked uncomfortable. Small thing. Most people wouldn't notice it. But I did. Because he kept glancing at me, like he wanted to say something. And every time he almost spoke, my mother interrupted first. The strange part? When I was little, before we lost the diner, my dad used to let me sit beside him after closing time. Just us. Empty booths. Lights half off. Country music playing quietly from the kitchen radio. He'd slide leftover pie across the counter and say, "Best seat in the house." Back then, I really believed him. And suddenly, sitting at that restaurant table years later, I realized how long it had been since anything felt that simple. That's when it happened. The restaurant owner walked in. Martin Calloway, gray suit, calm expression. The kind of man who notices everything. He greeted a few tables politely, shook hands, smiled. Then suddenly, he stopped, because he saw me. At first, I thought he might just nod politely, maybe say hello. But instead, he walked past my sister, past my mother, past everybody else at the table, straight toward me. And the second he smiled, my stomach dropped, because I already knew what was about to happen. And honestly, part of me wanted him to keep walking, to just nod politely, because once the truth became public, nothing between us would stay the same again. He stopped beside my chair and said, "Vanessa, I've been hoping you'd come by tonight." And for the first time all evening, my family stopped talking. The strange part wasn't that Martin recognized me, it was the way he said my name. Warm, respectful, familiar, not customer to owner, not polite small talk familiar, real familiar. And suddenly, my family started looking at me differently, not proudly, cautiously. Paige laughed first. Of course she did. That nervous little laugh people use when they lose control of a moment. She smiled at Martin and said, "Oh wow, you two know each other?" He looked at her politely, then answered calmly, "Very well." And somehow, those two words changed the entire table. Martin looked back at me, then said something I wish he hadn't said in front of them. "Most people come here because of the atmosphere." Then he glanced around the restaurant. "But this place still exists because of her." Silence. Not awkward silence. Shocked silence. My mother's face changed instantly. Not dramatic. Not loud. But I saw it. That tiny shift. The moment somebody realizes the story they believed might be wrong. She looked at me carefully, like she was seeing me for the first time. And honestly, that hurt more than the insults ever did. My brother Ethan finally spoke. "Wait, what does that mean?" Nobody answered immediately, because suddenly, everybody was trying to recalculate me, the broke daughter, the quiet sister, the girl they spent 12 years underestimating, and for the first time, they didn't know where to place me anymore. If people only respect you after success becomes visible, then they never respected you to begin with. Martin stayed calm, didn't rush, didn't over-explain. He simply said, "Vanessa helped keep this restaurant open 2 years ago." My sister blinked. My mother frowned. Ethan laughed once, like he thought there had to be more context coming. But there wasn't. Because sometimes the truth sounds unbelievable, when people already decided who you are. Then Martin added something worse. And not just this one. That's when my stomach tightened. Because now, I knew exactly where this was going. He started naming restaurants, places my family loved, places they bragged about online, places they took friends and coworkers. And one by one, every single name hit the table like a crack forming. My mom whispered, "Those places were yours too?" Not angry, not emotional, just confused. Like she couldn't connect the version of me she created with the version sitting in front of her now. And honestly, neither version felt fully real anymore. That's when my father did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket slowly, pulled out a thick envelope. Old, folded, worn at the edges. My mother looked confused. "What is that?" He didn't answer her. He handed it to me instead, and quietly said, "I kept them." I opened the envelope slowly. Inside, newspaper clippings, Local business articles, restaurant features, mentions of anonymous investors, recovery consultants, stories about restaurants surviving impossible situations, and every single article was about places I helped save. I looked at him, completely stunned. "You knew?" He nodded once, slowly, then said something I'll never forget. "I think I always knew you were doing better than you let them believe." Them. Not us. Them. For 12 years. My family treated me like the failure at the table. But now, the truth was sitting right in front of them, and nobody knew what to say next. My mother laughed softly, too softly, the kind of laugh people use when panic starts slipping through. Then she looked at me and said, "Vanessa, why didn't you tell us?" And honestly, that question hurt more than every joke before it, because suddenly, after 12 years, now they wanted to know me. I looked at her for a long moment, then said calmly, "Because none of you ever asked." Nobody moved, nobody interrupted. And for the first time in my life, my silence made them uncomfortable instead of me. My sister shook her head. "That's not fair." Fair. That word almost made me laugh. Because fairness would have been not turning me into the family failure, not making me feel small at every dinner, not assuming my worth based on what I showed publicly. But families like mine only believe pain when it embarrasses them. The waiter came back quietly. Different energy now. Before, he looked at me politely. Now, he looked nervous, respectful nervous, like somebody suddenly realizing they misjudged the wrong person. And when he placed my drink down, he said, "Thank you for what you did for this place." Softly, but loud enough for the table to hear. That's when I noticed something else. The staff kept glancing toward our table. Not casually, carefully, like they already knew who I was, like they'd been waiting for this moment too. And suddenly, my sister's expensive dinner stopped feeling like her event and started feeling like mine. If people only value you after somebody important validates you, they never truly saw you before. Then something happened I never expected. The chef walked out, still wearing his apron. A few servers followed behind him. Not dramatic, not loud, just intentional. And the chef smiled at me and said, "We heard you were here tonight." That's when my mother stopped looking confused and started looking ashamed. My family didn't know what to do anymore. Usually, they controlled the energy, the jokes, the conversation, the image. But now, the room belonged to someone else, and for the first time, they were the uncomfortable ones sitting at the table. My dad looked at me carefully, then quietly said, "You built all this without telling anybody." Not accusing, not angry, almost sad. I shrugged slightly. Nobody cared when I tried before. And honestly, that sentence hit the table harder than anything else that night. My mother whispered, "We thought you were struggling." I looked at her calmly. I was. That part was true. They looked confused again, so I continued. But struggling financially and struggling emotionally aren't the same thing. And suddenly, nobody at the table could look directly at me anymore. Martin returned with a black folder in his hands. Simple, clean, professional. Then he placed it beside me and said, "Whenever you're ready." The entire table stared at the folder. Nobody asked questions this time, because somehow, they already knew. Whatever was inside it changed the balance of the room completely. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't sitting at the weakest end of the table anymore. They spent years making me feel small in restaurants, Now they were sitting silently inside one that existed because of me. I stared at the black folder for a long time, not because I didn't know what was inside, because suddenly, everybody else cared what was inside too. That was new. For 12 years, nobody wanted details about my work. Nobody asked where I went. Nobody cared what I was building. But now, the whole table was waiting for answers. Inside, partnership agreements, expansion documents, investment contracts. Then he looked at me and said, "The new location is ready whenever you are." The entire table stared silently, and suddenly, my family realized this wasn't charity. I helped build this place. And when I picked up the pen, my mother stopped breathing for a second. The second I signed, the energy in the restaurant shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just noticeably. A few staff members near the bar looked over and smiled quietly. One of the servers nodded at me with the kind of respect that isn't performative. Then somebody near the kitchen whispered, "She's the reason we're still open." And somehow, that quiet recognition felt bigger than every fake compliment my family had ever given each other. Paige looked completely lost now, not angry, not dramatic, just disoriented, like she couldn't understand how the sister she pitied became the person everybody in the room respected. Then she whispered, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" And honestly, that question exhausted me. I looked directly at her, calm, steady, then said, "Because you already decided who I was." Nobody interrupted, so I continued. Every time I tried to talk about my life, somebody turned it into a joke. Eventually, I stopped explaining myself. And suddenly, the silence at the table changed again, heavier this time. My father leaned back slowly, then looked around the table and said something nobody expected. "I think she stopped talking because we stopped hearing her years ago." That line hit my mother hard. I could see it, because deep down, she knew it was true too. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, emotionally, like the version of me she carried in her head was collapsing in real time. Then quietly, almost painfully, she asked, "Were you really struggling all those years?" I smiled sadly. "Yes." She looked confused again, so I added, "Just not financially." I told them the truth, not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. Do you know what it feels like to sit at a table with your own family and feel embarrassing? Nobody answered. Do you know what it feels like when people stop being curious about you? Still nothing. And the worst part? I still wanted them to care, because some questions hurt too much to answer out loud. When dinner ended, something strange happened. Nobody rushed out. Nobody grabbed attention. Nobody tried controlling the room anymore. For the first time in my life, my family looked uncertain around me. And honestly, I didn't feel powerful. I felt free. Because the label they gave me 12 years ago finally stopped belonging to me. Martin walked me toward the entrance. The staff smiled as I passed. Outside, the city lights reflected against the restaurant windows. And behind me, my family stayed at the table quietly, still processing, still trying to understand how wrong they had been. My mother called my name softly before I left. "Vanessa." I turned once, and for the first time, she wasn't looking at me like I was the family disappointment. She was looking at me like someone she never really knew. Then I walked away. Not angry, not emotional, just finally done proving myself. Because they called me the broke one for 12 years. But the truth was simple. I was never poor. I was just building a life quietly, in places that knew how to value me long before my family ever did. They thought money decided who mattered, until the entire restaurant stood up for the daughter they overlooked.